Hello and welcome to the CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast. I am Andrew Wade with Case Specific Nutrition. On this channel, we focus on the three M's: mindsets, myth busting, and mentoring, all as they pertain to health and nutrition. This podcast is brought to you by Case Specific Meal Prep. This is Pittsburgh's premier meal prep and delivery service, csmpgh.com. Place your orders by Thursday at noon. These meals are developed by myself and our team of registered dietitians, along with an executive chef. We're excited to provide you with high quality food to allow your week to go smoothly. Before we dig in today, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure to share today's episode on your favorite social media. Help us spread the health by hashtagging Spread the Health. For more case-specific nutrition content, you can follow us on Case Specific Nutrition on all social media, as well as visit us at casespecificnutrition.com. Today's episode, I have a very, very special interview. It is a client interview with Rachel. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
I've been really excited to interview. As I said to the listeners, this year my goal was to do more interviews. Last year, season one, there was 52 episodes, and I think 8 of them were interviews. So there were
Oh,
40,
wow.
44 episodes of me just like, meh, 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 my opinions matter. And again, a lot of listeners, people seem to find them interesting. I at least kept them short, 10, 15 minutes of glaring and flaring opinion. But my goal this year for season 2 really was to sort of pass the speaking, right? To be somebody that engaged in more conversations, that got insights from people. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to do at least 13 professional interviews and at
Mhm.
least 13 testimony/client interviews. And you were one of the first people that came to mind when I was sitting there last fall, sort of finishing up season 1, planning season 2. I made a list of who were some of the people that had really good stories that I think would provide immense value to the listeners. And you were literally the first one. So know that about yourself, and I'm really excited to dig in today. Before we get started, I want to make sure to let everybody know that we are joined in-house by Rottweilers. We've got sleeping boys. They are hanging out with me here in our office. And so if you hear random shaking of collars or a random bark at an Amazon truck, you now know that we are in good company. But in my opinion, no podcast is better if it doesn't have dogs involved, right?
Right.
So without further ado, I want to dig in today. I will let you take the floor after I just give one more pretense preface, which is that the reason that you were in the top of my list, the reason you came to mind, is because you have gone through the phases of a journey that most people are either in the journey of or unaware of. And more importantly, though, it's the journey that a lot of people need to go through to get to what we would truly call health. And what we're going to dig into today, sort of is that age-old journey of people lose weight, and eventually they become a little bit obsessed with the weight loss. And then when the weight loss is done, they become a little bit detached or feel a little bit, they have a little bit of what we call like what now syndrome. And that can lead to sort of this searching and seeking, for different new things to restore identity, because in a lot of people, bigger weight loss journeys sort of are your identity for a 1 or 2 or 3 year period. And then you're looking for this new identity. And that means identity struggle takes place.
Mhm.
And eventually there's typically a period of what most would call like regression, but the regression phase doesn't have to be a complete abandonment of new identity or a return to old identity. It's typically a recalibration. It's an assessment period. It's when you're trying to figure out how to go forward. And then there's this opportunity to go forward with true health, with good whys, right? With a connection of why you're doing what you're doing. And I've known you now for quite a few years, and your
Yeah.
journey started before you and I worked together. And I've watched you go through those phases and tried to support you as you've gone through them. And we are now in a very, very positive and more permanent state of mind and being. Your connection with what you're doing and why you're doing it is in a really, really beautiful place. And so what I want to do today is I want to let you kind of tell your story. And I'm hoping that I can sort of help people pinpoint the different phases along the way and recognize maybe where they are in their journey. And the hope is that people are able to see that this current like weight loss obsessed, let's do a 6-week challenge to drop some pounds, really misses the point of what true health and wellness is, right? At the end of the
Absolutely.
day, someone who moves well because they like it, it's a hobby, it's an outlet, it's an expression, it's an emotional outlet, and people who enjoy food and have a good relationship with food and understand how it flows and fits in their life, that is what health is. And when we try and just obsess about food and obsess about movement, we kind of miss it. So without further ado, please, with as much detail as you're willing to give, kind of start with the beginning of your journey, right? Like, I mean, you can even start pre-weight loss, so to speak, and let people kind of hear. And I'll try to not speak a ton and interrupt a ton, but if I hear something that I want to make sure I can highlight, I will. I'll sort of earmark and asterisk things along the way.
Sure. Yeah. So I think when I think about the overall picture of my story, I think it kind of started around puberty. So as like a elementary school kid and stuff, I was always super tall and I was never overweight, but I was never like the thin little girl in the classroom. So I always felt a little different than the other, I would just say kids in general, because as we know, boys don't grow until like they're 20. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not incorrect though.
So I was always really tall and everything, but once puberty hit, it was kind of like I just started gaining weight little by little. And when I was young, my parents were super healthy, but puberty kind of lose all control. And it just seemed like through high school and going into college, my weight kind of just constantly inched up. And I was always aware of it. And I went away to school for a year. And I was unhappy there. And I kind of just looking back, I know that food was the only really thing that brought me happiness when I was there. And it wasn't even happiness. It was just kind of like a distraction.
It was that
And
outlet, that
right.
emotional outlet. It was the crutch, the thing that gave you a little bit of dopamine when you were feeling down.
100%. Yes. And I would say my early 20s is when I really started putting on a lot of weight. And like I said, I didn't even really notice it. Like I knew, but I was just kind of like, it is what it is. This is who I am. Like I was never really, I didn't like love it, but it was so gradual over time that it was just kind of like, okay. And then I'd say about 5 years ago, my sister and I always kind of thought in the back of my head, like one of these days I'm going to have to like really take care of this, but it's not today. And then about 5 years ago, we were going on a family vacation and my sister was like, hey, I kind of want to join Weight Watchers. I want to lose some weight for vacation. And I was like real against it, like very negative, kind of like, why? Like, I don't want to pay for that, blah, 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 blah. And then they just so happened to be having like the beginning of the year free 2 months or whatever it is, they rope everyone in.
Absolutely. The first 10 on us.
Right. Yeah. So we ended up signing up the very last day. It was like January 31st and we signed up. And I remember I felt like indifferent about it, whatever. I downloaded the app. I didn't really get super into it, just followed the app closely. Now it's like completely different. I don't know all the rules and whatever, but downloaded the app. And the first thing I noticed after I would say about a week was that I could eat all of the fruits and vegetables I wanted, and it didn't count negatively towards anything. So it was like at the end of the night, immediately I was like, oh, I'm still hungry. Okay, well, I don't have any points or whatever, but I can eat this apple or I can eat this carrot and celeries. And I still like these things, but it's not going to like negatively impact me or whatever. So after about 3 weeks, I was like, okay, I kind of had it figured out. I lost a lot of weight in that first week, which, as we know, it's like water weight. And when you are severely overweight, you see that huge drop right away. So the first week I lost like 10 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking like, oh, that's cool. Like 10 pounds,
They get you hooked that way. Yep.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, so I did it the second week. And the second week I lost 6 pounds. And
Hmm.
that's 16 pounds in 2 weeks. Like, that's crazy. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I wasn't exercising at all in this period of time.
Yeah.
And then it went down to 3 pounds. And then after that, it was just a consistent like 2 pounds, 1 pound, half a pound for months. And I stopped. I think I deleted the app for Weight Watchers after 3 weeks because
Hmm.
I just immediately saw, okay, I can't eat this food, which was, let's be honest, all the prepackaged like donuts at work, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I can't eat all of that because when I do, I can only have this, and then the rest of my day is like gone, you know?
Yeah.
So immediately I like made the switch in my brain, and I
Well,
weighed
it's
myself.
cool because you hear there like you, and this is where Weight Watchers can get a little bit of it can be pretty toxic for people, right? Is it all goes back to what do you focus on? Do you focus on what you're removing or what you're adding? And so in this instance, you started removing things, but
Mhm.
then you also started adding things, right? So it's like,
Right.
if I eat donuts randomly when I'm tired and hungry, that doesn't support me the way I would like it to, but this apple will instead. And so
Right.
it's funny because you start to realize that that swap can have value, but it also can be somewhat of a paradox that gets people a little bit resentful, which we'll get to down the road. But that was
Absolutely.
Weight Watchers exposed you to this initial concept that they do, which is eat this, not that.
Mhm.
And that can be a good or bad thing. It can be well received or it can be interpreted poorly. And that is a big pitfall that a lot of people fall into that lead to fear of food and obsession along the way.
Yeah.
And again, well, I'm alluding to too much, but go ahead.
No, that's
Sorry.
fine. So I think looking back, it was great because it allowed me to start eating foods that, like, I was eating broccoli and I never ate broccoli, you know?
Exactly. The
So it was
additions,
great.
so to speak, the
Yeah,
things you added, that's the good stuff.
right. But at the same time, mentally, I I wasn't like, it was just kind of like, oh, this is what I'm doing to lose weight.
Hmm.
So
The
long
why
story,
wasn't there, right?
exactly. So like I said, after 3 weeks, I stopped with the Weight Watchers. I just kind of cleaned up my diet. I wasn't working out. About 6 months into it, I started working out. I had lost, I like 60 pounds.
Hmm.
It was a lot. And it was kind of like, okay, well, I felt better about myself.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, we ended up buying a used treadmill and I started running on there, walking on there, and just really started putting the exercise into my diet. And fast forward 10 months, I had lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
That's a lot of weight in a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that truly was just cutting out the heavy amounts of processed food, fast food, all of that, and really just
Hmm.
introducing like the better options in my diet. And then eventually I added in the exercise. So about 10 months, I had lost 100 pounds. And then along the way, I kind of set small goals. I remember when I first lost that first week, it was like, okay, let's see if I can lose 25. And then it was like, okay, let's see if we can lose 50. And then it was like, okay, well, let's see if we can lose 100. Because when I started this journey, I weighed 300 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was 5'11", and I was 25. So after I lost 100 pounds, it was like, it was like amazing, to be perfectly honest. And the
Yeah.
fact that I did it on my own, like,
There's a massive
and
amount of accomplishment. But once again, we
right.
can hear where in this journey, right, you were then starting to identify as like the girl that lost the weight,
Yes.
feeling the positive feelings, the dopamine spike, right? The dopamine that you used to eat processed food emotionally for was
Mhm.
now based on your weight loss. And while in the moment that feels big hoorah, what we are going to talk about obviously in the coming minutes is that eventually that goes away and then we enter this phase of, well, what now? But go ahead, sorry.
Right. So I ended up losing like a total of, it was almost 125 pounds. And I started to gain a little bit. And I started to notice that I was worried about keeping it off long term. I didn't want
Hmm.
to gain it all back. And that is when I reached out to you
Hmm.
and started coming to you. And it was like, okay, I had gained some back. I remember when I first started coming to you, I was like 204 or something.
Hmm.
And we kind of talked about my goals and what I wanted. And that's kind of when I started really dialing it in, because I hadn't really paid, like, I didn't, little things like everyone preaches how peanut butter is protein, protein, protein. It's more fat. So it's like, I'd be like, oh, peanut butter, it's good, it's just protein. And I'd eat like half a jar. And I'm like, why did I gain 5 pounds this week? You know, just like, yeah. So when I came to you, it was more for like, okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't work so hard all those months and then gain it all back. And then we had started, and then I set a goal to run a half marathon.
Hmm.
And I think I set that goal because I was always the kid in school who I didn't even run the mile. Like, I just walked.
Yeah.
You know, like gym teachers were like rolling their eyes because I was the last one out there. And it was kind of like, okay, you know what? Like, I lost all this weight. I could do this. You know, what's
Yeah.
the worst case scenario? I'll walk a little bit. And I joined a CrossFit gym. And over the next few months, it was just like nothing else really mattered
Yeah.
other than what I was eating, when I was eating, and when I was exercising.
Yeah. And I remember this phase as being kind of what I alluded to in the beginning when I explained that there's this sort of, you lose this weight and then it becomes, well, this weight loss journey has kind of like met its end, which means the thing that
Mm-hmm.
you've identified as for a year is no longer your identity, so to speak. So
Right.
then you enter this phase where you start seeking a new identity. And when you and I first met, you had a bunch of friends that were into CrossFit and were really
Mm-hmm.
fitness focused. And so you were socially starting to align with that group of people, and you were
Right.
sort of entering into that world, right? And you were testing the waters. And that's where you and I talked about, fueling based on, your needs, and, ramping up food because you're burning more, and you
Mm-hmm.
were hitting all these workouts. But at the end of the day, what we kind of came to find was that you didn't really, those weren't places that gave you the true feeling of fit. You were really searching for your new identity, who you were in all this, and what you wanted, not just like you said, short term, but what you wanted long term.
Right. Because when I was going to the CrossFit 5 days a week, I was running before I'd go to CrossFit. I mean, there were some days when, because the first CrossFit class, I went to 5 a.m. I'd get up and go and run before CrossFit, show up to
Hmm.
CrossFit all sweaty. I wouldn't, I'd make excuses up not to meet like my best friend for breakfast on a Saturday. It's just nothing else mattered because, like you said, like it was always, what's the scale drop? What's the scale drop? What's the scale drop? I hit that big number and it was like, well, now what? So it
Hmm.
was just kind of like, okay, working out, running, but like I pushed everything else to the side. So
Exactly.
that's kind of when I did that for a solid year, I would say.
Yeah.
And I definitely got to the lowest number on the scale, but I didn't reach, like, I wasn't happy. Even though
Yeah.
I had been the thinnest and the most fit, in my head, it wasn't good enough. Like, I wasn't like, I'm like, okay, well, I could probably lose like 3 more pounds, or, I'm still not a fast runner. And it just like nothing was ever good enough. I wasn't just out
Hmm.
there running to run or whatever.
You never, you
So,
you still hadn't connected with your why, right? We were still
no,
holding on to this, this why that validated you for a period of time in the form of weight loss.
right.
And your brain kept going back to that because it was like, I felt really good when this was my attention. I felt really good. So it kept going back to that. And it kept seeing people that really like were like loving the performance world. And so
Hmm.
it was like, well, maybe I just need to focus on performance. But those things, right? The weight loss was a temporary phase that
Yeah,
really couldn't be your identity. And
no,
these fitness aspirations weren't necessarily in line with your true identity. And so
no,
we had this phase where, like you said, you were getting results, but you really weren't truly connecting with what you actually wanted. And
right,
that's where this really gets to come big picture. But this
right.
is great. Keep it coming. I love this.
So I would say after that first year, after I ran that marathon, I just started to kind of, I don't know, like rebel against all of it.
Hmm.
When it comes to food, it was like I restricted myself for so long that it was like the dam broke.
Yep.
And it wasn't that I didn't care anymore, but it was like, oh my God, I haven't had a slice of birthday cake in, I can't tell you how long. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
and it was just like, even if I was eating healthy foods, I was eating a lot of them. And I started to not feel good about myself. I stopped going to the gym. I took a little break from that. I started, and then it just was a journey of trying to find like the workouts that I really enjoyed. And I don't know, like mentally I was like all messed up because it was like you said, I had lost all this weight. I got all this attention for losing this weight. And then I was this athlete and I felt good about it, but like I wasn't losing weight anymore. And it was just nothing, like it was like nothing was connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to gain weight back again. And I think I stopped weighing myself, but the highest I got back to was 212. And I've said since day one, like I will never be 300 pounds ever again. I just won't. And you and I had started working on it again. And I kind of eased into going back into the gym and just doing things that I liked. There wasn't like a long-term goal. It was just like, get to the gym to, move your body, feel good, because every time I work out, I feel good afterwards. Like
Exactly.
you never have a workout where even if it's not your best workout, you still feel good afterwards.
Yep.
So it was just getting back and just, getting myself there mentally. Oh, I think it took years, like
Yeah, no, absolutely.
years.
And I will say, and this is why I wanted to interview you right here, this piece, because this is the part of the journey that if it doesn't, one, people try and skip it. And
Oh,
if you skip it, it will always come back. And that's the reality, right? And more importantly, it's the more genuine journey itself. We live in this world that's obsessed with weight loss challenges and dropping pounds. We have companies like Weight Watchers that promise the first 10 on us.
uh-huh.
They're not promising a change in life. They're
Yeah.
promising a change in weight. And so, yes, at 300 pounds, you were disconnected from your body's needs, your emotional needs. And we can hear that the scale was simply just one random objective measure that was reflecting that emotional state, right?
Mhm.
You were not in a healthy state, and the scale simply reflected that. And yes, those positive habits initially that created the weight loss are positive habits that can be valuable to being healthier, but
Right.
only if they're actually things you're doing for the right reasons. If you're doing them for the sake of weight loss, yes, they'll produce weight loss, but they won't actually connect with you, which means you're
Yeah.
never going to be doing them for a reason that you'll keep doing them, right? And that's when I said earlier, that idea that like, do people that live longer tend to eat well, right? Eat good, high quality foods and move well? Yes. But do they do it out of obligation? No, they do it out of identity. They
Yeah.
do it because it feels good. And so, my favorite part of your journey, to be honest, because when we first met, you had already lost all this weight. And I remember some of the first things that I said to you were, you're going to enter a phase of what now syndrome, right? Weight loss has
Mhm.
been your identity. And now we've got to find, like, who are you now that you're the lighter you? And some people dive into the performance world and they live that and they breathe that and they own that and they identify with that. And that's great. But you dipped your toes in, you tried it, you never really felt something that really fit. And so once that didn't fit, once you kind of you sampled it, so to speak, your brain got to a point where it said, well, wait, who am I? And that's when, like you said, you started to doubt some of the habits, you started to lose some of the motivation.
Yeah.
You took a break from the scale, and I remember us discussing that,
Mhm.
and thinking that it was a good idea, because I really felt like you needed to shift your gears towards your why. And that's when that's when I think our relationship changed the most, is because I went from being this guy that you got connected with because I was going to help you fuel as an athlete,
Right.
to I got to become the guy that was going to help you redefine your why and realign your identity with who you are and who you're going to be. And that's deep and that's hard and it takes time, but man, is it the most valuable thing you can do, because through that time, when some people, if they're scale obsessed, would call it your regression,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
it's when the scale went back up. That regression was the most critical learning phase for your overall well-being, right? Because once you started to break through, you started to force yourself to ask new questions, which is, why do I care about what I eat?
Mhm.
Not because the scale goes down, not because I get attention from other people. Why do I care about what I eat? Oh, because it feels really good. I have better energy. My mood is more stable. I like to
Absolutely.
support my body. I like to support my mindset. And then the other one, which is the one that you battled with quite a bit, was, why do I want to move?
Mhm.
Right? I don't identify as an athlete. I'm no longer exercising to burn X calories to drop the weight like I did, in the second half of my Weight Watchers journey.
Right.
What does movement do for me? Right? And you start to identify, it's my stress reliever. I'm someone who's anxiety prone, or I'm somebody that, again, during college, when you were using food as that emotional coping mechanism, physical activity can be that outlet for you. I always say that I'm one run shy of a panic attack, is the way I always joke about it. And it's just to say that my activity is my me time. I carve that out so that I
Yeah.
can emotionally outlet, so that I can collect my thoughts, so that I can, wear myself through. And I find that to be an extremely valuable piece of my life. And again, I'm not exercising for the physical performance aspect of it necessarily. I'm not exercising because of obligation. I
Right.
exercise because of the value it brings to me. And you started to find that. And we sampled a lot of different activity, but it was
Right.
neat because during that like 6 month period where you were in what a lot of people would call regression, I would call a relearning and
Yeah.
reconnecting phase. And you started to find movement that you liked for the purpose of emotional outlets. And you started to find movement that wasn't reliant on other people, but was something that was really for you. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and it was just that phase was one of my favorites, because just like the economy climbs and then inevitably it has to dip a little bit before it can build
Mhm.
back better, most of us, when we are learning and growing, we do that. We learn and we learn and we learn, we get checked, and then from that check we learn and learn and learn, and it's what makes us better people. It's what allows us to become more intelligent, and in this case, it's what allowed you to finally start the journey of coming to terms with who you are and what health meant for you, not just from a number perspective, not just from a scale perspective, not just from an attention perspective, but what was it? How did it provide a base for you to be the best you in whatever you choose to do? Um, so talk a little bit for me about, I guess, if you have a resume point in the story that you want to get to, but what I'm excited to share or have people hear is sort of that reconnection phase, right? So like you said, didn't weigh yourself, the scale went up, neither here nor there, because during that phase, you were really asking yourself some tough questions that forced you to step away from the things that were your foundations. And then you started to reintroduce them in a new mindset. So talk through
Yeah.
that mindset a little bit and sort of where that's led to, to present day.
Well, I stopped weighing myself. I didn't count macros or anything. I kind of just, I mean, I got to the point where I knew how to eat,
Yeah.
and I just ate in that way. But my exercising was kind of all over the place. I wasn't weighing myself. And I kind of just got to the point one day, and I remember emailing you and being like, I'm ready to step on the scale. And I just like was like, and I remember years prior, I'd step on the scale, and no matter what, there'd be anxiety. Like, did I lose weight? Did I gain weight? Did I stay the same? And then it got to the point, and then we had picked a day. It was like, okay, well, I'll weigh because as you know, I'm like, I'll weigh myself Saturday or I'll weigh myself Sunday, and
Yep.
I can't do things just in the middle of the week.
Yep.
So it was like, all right, Saturday, I'm going to step on the scale. I stepped on the scale. I saw the number, and I was kind of just like, that's the number. And I remember I emailed you and I was like, I weighed this. I'm not mad about it. I
Very
don't love
neutral.
it. Yeah. It was just like, this is what I weigh. And okay, like,
Yeah, I remember when you sent that email to me, and my immediate response, if you remember, was, the scale is only valuable if you can look at it as a data point that is detached, because
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything, right? And what the number is doesn't change the journey that you're on, right? You're
No.
still in this seeking of trying to connect with self and health. And I was really curious to see, because after years of the scale being the thing that defined you,
Yeah.
that gave emotional value or senses of guilt and shame,
Mhm.
it's really hard to disconnect from it and get to a point where we realize, wait, this really isn't like the dominant thing. My life shouldn't be based on this. And if you're somebody that can weigh yourself and not emotionally respond, then you can weigh yourself, right? It's not a big,
Right.
it's not good or bad. It just is at that point. But we had taken you out of a place where weighing was a toxic thing for you. And so
Yeah.
I remember being really curious. You said, I'm going to weigh myself. And I was like, okay, remember that this is that sort of emotional test. What does this number mean to you? And I remember you emailing me back and saying, this is the number. I'm really surprised because right now I feel nothing. I feel not positive, negative,
Yeah.
critical. And I was like, that's exactly what we need, because the scale isn't what's telling you the journey you're on.
Right.
And it was neat because what that did happen is I think that time weighing yourself maybe felt like a new chapter of acceptance, where all of a sudden you felt differently. Instead of feeling like you were avoiding the scale, perhaps now you faced it and you went, wait a second, this really doesn't mean to me what it used to mean to me. This isn't the defining element of my journey like it used to
No.
be.
Yeah.
This is just another data point of 35 possible data points that I can choose whether or not have value. And
Right.
more importantly, it's an end result of processes of being connected with self, of being emotionally supported, of being in tune with movement, of fueling and feeding in a way that I enjoy. And
Mhm.
that point started this more recent chapter that you've been on,
Right.
where I don't want to spoil any of it, so I'll let you tell the journey of what I will call you truly connecting with your lifestyle and sort of living like the healthier you, is the way I'd say it. Instead
Yeah.
of forcing healthy habits, living like the healthier you and truly just being her and being content about that. So tell the world
Yeah. Well,
it.
I mean, I stepped on the scale that day. I saw the number and it wasn't the number I wanted to see, but I was indifferent about it, like you said. And I don't know, kind of moved ahead and I weigh myself every week and I could have the best week in the gym. Like I could feel great. And now I just move and to feel good. Like it's not like, okay, well, I'm going to do yoga. And then, well, I have to be the best at yoga. It's like, well, I'm just going to do yoga today, but I might not do it for another 3 months. But hey, this is the way I'm moving today, you know?
Hmm.
And I might have a great week in the gym and the scale might go up 2 pounds.
Yeah.
But it's not like I'm like, well, I still ate healthy. I had great workouts. I felt good in my body. It's not like I gained 2 pounds of fat and the next week it's like down 3 pounds or something crazy,
Hmm.
like it just doesn't, and like you said, it's just another way of kind of, I don't, just tracking life. Like, and, and it's like Monday through Friday, I still, I dial it in. Because I don't really have a reason not to. I'd
Hmm.
rather skip the lunchroom piece of cake that probably doesn't taste good anyways, to
And
have
probably
like,
isn't going to actually make you happy, right? Like,
no, because I've just sit in that chair for 9 hours and then it's
yeah.
just sitting
I,
there.
I'd rather eat something like cake when I'm actually celebrating. Like
Right.
I want to eat food like that when I'm feeling happy. I don't want to use it to try and force myself to be happy in
Yeah.
a state that may not actually be happy. Right.
Yeah. Like now I won't eat the birthday cake or whatever in the lunchroom that's left over because I just don't really want it. But on Saturday, when we're celebrating my sister's birthday, I'm gonna have a piece of birthday cake because like it's her
Absolutely you
birthday.
are. Yeah,
Who cares? Yeah.
it's the emotional framework of like that food being a little bit more relevant and a little bit more useful
Yeah.
in that cultural circumstance.
Yeah. And it
Um,
truly doesn't affect me in any way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's really funny is, so what starts to happen, and you kind of said this, and I think it's still something that your mind is trying to accept, right? The phase of your journey that you're in, is that the scale really doesn't mean anything.
No.
What it does is it is one of 5,000 other habits that are
Yeah.
simply, and it's what you'd call an intention, which is that when you step on the scale on Saturday, that is when you decide to reflect back on your week and ask
Yeah.
yourself, did I support myself well? Am I happy with how I moved? Am I happy with how I fueled myself? Is my life in tune? And you don't necessarily need the scale to be the reminder of that. Some
Nope.
people might do a Saturday morning journal session. Some people might decide to. I know for me, mine is the Sunday morning hike with the dogs.
Mhm.
I do a reflection and a projection on what's going on in what went on in my world and what I want to do going forward. We tend to bundle or piggyback reflective time to a task or a thing that's already habitual. And so the scale is a simple task: walk
Yeah.
in, step on, look at number. But for you, it went from being this like drum roll, please,
Yeah.
biggest loser, beep, 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 what's it going to be number, to just being like the random thing that you've chosen to assign your reflection to. And I think
Yeah.
in time, what'll probably happen is you'll replace the scale as that reminder with something that's a little bit more valuable, because really all you're doing is at the end of the week, you're reminding yourself in some way to take inventory. And
Absolutely.
all it does is it lets you reflect and go, man, that last week felt really good. Or, you know what? My stress really got the best of me this week. I
Yeah.
really didn't make very much time for myself. I'm going to do that going forward. And does the scale tell us that? No, your connection with your habits are what tell you that. The scale is simply the arbitrary thing you do that might remind you to think of it in the first place. And so
Right.
I wanted to make sure I highlighted that, because there are a lot of people that I completely remove the scale with, right? And we simply assign another thing that allows them to connect with themselves. And it might
Yeah.
be that Saturday morning yoga session, or it might be that, again, Sunday hike. It might be a journaling session. It might be something, again, just something that we end up doing somewhat consistently that allows
Yeah.
the mind to take inventory.
Yeah, I could totally see replacing the scale with like a short journal entry, because in a way, when I stand on the scale and I see whatever number it's there, it's like, oh, well, I was super stressed out this week. We I had to eat out a couple times because of work. We had work, whatever. Or it's like I was on vacation for a week. Of course, the scale's going to be up because
Yeah,
you're living life. But
exactly.
yeah, and the scale is going to show those things. But like you said, writing it in a journal or reflecting on it while you take a walk, it's all going to be the same thoughts.
Exactly.
It, so I could,
The scale's
yeah,
just it's a random number that you see that might draw that. And like you said, you see it go up, and it's not that you react to it, but you're like, oh, it's that time of the month, or oh,
right,
this week there was this and this. But once again, if we're not careful, what people can start doing is they start becoming obsessed with that number again. They start
right,
to, because they're trying to explain the number, they lose sight of what they're actually trying to do, which is at the end of the week, take inventory on,
yeah.
are they caring for themselves? Right at the end of a week,
That's
regardless
really all that
of what
matters.
the scale says, right? Like you said, at the end of the week, if you can step on it and that's the thing that reminds you to go, did I care for myself this week? And then you say, yeah, I was on vacation and I had some really good self-care time. The
Yeah.
problem is the number oftentimes distracts from that. And you've done a very good job. And to be honest, it's funny because you realize that you and I do our Saturday check-in.
Hmm.
That's part of the reason that I do that with you, is because when you check in, you don't just send me a number. You actually
Yeah.
let me know how you felt about your week. And so, to be fair, we could just as easily remove the number and you could
Hmm.
just reflect on your week in your Saturday check in, which is what I do with a lot of people.
Right.
I have people send me weekly reflections, right? Which is not number dependent, but is simply, I'm in tune with my habits. They
Hmm.
felt really good. They supported me well this week. These are some things, as I reflect, I'm realizing that might have interrupted or increased my stress or whatever it is. So I'm going to make sure I prep some good food this week and set myself up, because I know the week ahead is going to be crazy, right? It's sometimes life moves so fast that all we really need to do is slow it down for a moment to take
Yeah.
inventory on what's been happening and what may come. Um, and because of your weight loss history and all of those things, and because
Hmm.
of your current partnership and relationship and those
Hmm.
things, the scale is an easy way to do that. But there's 1,000 other ways to do it. And I think a lot of people start to find that the scale's not a useful one, because
Right.
even though you now have the ability to step on the scale and feel neutral about it,
Yeah.
the question becomes, does that number really prompt you to think about your self-care in a more effective way than a Saturday journal entry would? And to be
Yeah.
honest, I might argue that a Saturday journal entry is probably more valuable because it allows you to focus on the process instead of the product, right? It allows you to
Yeah.
focus on the things you were doing this week to support yourself and your health and your well-being instead of the product, which is, how did the water weight change this week based on life, right?
Right. Yeah. I could totally see, I could see very soon just not even stepping on that scale every Saturday. I could
Yeah.
see like maybe checking in with myself once a month or once every 6 weeks, just to kind of, I don't know, like, hey, how's it going on the
have
scale?
have have a data point.
Yeah. But other than that, I definitely agree. The reflecting back on the week and really, I mean, it takes like 2 minutes just to think about your week and be like, wow, this week was really tough,
Yeah,
but hey, I got through it. Let's see what we can do next week. What did I learn? Where can we go from here? And it takes a couple minutes, and
I
really
love that.
it's more important than any other thing you could do on your journey just to be healthy, really.
I
So
love this. And this
yeah.
this is spoiler. I didn't tell you this, but this was part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on in March. Is because as you and I have been working together, I've been watching the scale fade in your life. I've
Hmm.
been watching you better connect with your habits. I've been watching you exercise and move with intentions that feel connected to self.
Yeah.
I've been watching you fuel your body in a way that feels good, having a flow during the week that allows you to stress less and,
Hmm.
care more, having some fun on the weekends that
Yeah.
allows you to feel connected to life and, remove the guilt and shame. You've been on a very, very positive journey. And, sometimes a significant event allows us to sort of accelerate that. And it's to say that your journey is still very much in motion, right?
Right.
You've made massive strides in the last year in terms of connecting with your health in a more genuine way. And I actually was identifying that our next phase really is sort of that scale going from being the thing that like gave you the first motivation out of that early 20s depressed state,
Right.
and then gave you this like rumination and frustration during a phase, and then the thing that kind of restarted or jump started maybe a different way of thinking. And it's coming to a point where the scale is becoming less and less valuable. It's becoming just a number.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you're focusing more and more on the habits. And so I wanted to actually have this discussion because I think that I'm hoping that one, it's reinforcing to you, and there's almost like a recorded epiphany, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I also think that once again, the people that have been listening to this are going to be at various phases of a very similar journey, right? Shifting from this weight loss for the sake of weight loss mindset to truly connecting with their habits, why they're doing them, why they'd like to do them, and what they're
Yeah.
doing for them. And as that happens, things fade, things change. And I wanted people to hear, one, the amazing journey that you've been on, but then also the exciting phases of the journey that you have yet to hit. Your health and your happiness and your connection with you has been ramping up, but it's just getting started. And I can't
Right.
wait to see what the year ahead happens for you with your mindset, and
Hmm.
all the exciting life things you have going on. Obviously, in this year, you developed a very serious relationship.
Hmm.
You guys are house hunting. Life is, doing all these wonderful things, and you're not stuck ruminating and obsessing over numbers and all that stuff. You're
No.
allowing healthy habits to be the support that gives you the energy and the vitality to go out and deal with the stressful housing situation,
Yeah.
and deal with all of these new life things. And so, thanks again for taking the time. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure you shared about your journey, or any little like tips that you can think of off the top of your head that you would tell somebody that's, along the journey that you're currently walking?
I think when people ask me for advice and, things like that, I always say to start with small goals,
Hmm.
and the mental part of it is the hardest part.
Yeah.
It's easy, and it's easy, and people, you might think maybe it's easy for me to say, but for me it was easy to lose the weight. The
Yeah.
mental portion of it is the hardest part. And you really just got to keep going, like
I love
one
that.
bad day or one bad week isn't going to derail your whole life. Just kind of chalk it up to it is what it is. Let's get back on the horse and, let's keep going. So, yeah,
If
it's about
we,
all.
I like that. If we can reframe the thought that bad is bad and bad means
Right.
failure, and instead reframe it that a week that didn't feel great is a learning opportunity, right? It's a chance to
Yeah.
reflect on it and go, why didn't that feel good, right? Like if I could
Yeah.
have relived that, how may I have adjusted it and go, that's good notes for the future. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, if you're 30 years old, if you're 50 years old, you better still be willing to learn about life and self, right? There's no point where we should just be like, well, I know everything I know to be the human I am. Well, that's a very, very closed and fixed mindset. We really want to allow that growth mindset of when things don't go well, that doesn't mean we failed. It means we have a new opportunity to learn. And if we can
Right.
reframe that, you will find that instead of guilt and shame, you get excited about the ability to
Yes.
learn, apply, implement, and grow. And that's where we start to remove all these negative feelings and we start to replace them with a continuous, genuine feeling of supporting of self. And you start to focus on the right things. So that's a great tip. I love that. Breaking things down into small pieces, letting
Yeah.
them grow, not beating yourself up about that growth, but instead allowing growth and trusting that growth is a natural phase that bumps its way up, and
Yeah.
and we don't have to force it. We can allow it to take place over time. As they say, the time's going to pass anyway. We might as well do
Yeah.
something good with it. So
Definitely.
um, that's a great place to end. I really do appreciate you being willing to share your journey. I know everybody listening is going to walk away from this going, oh man, I'm here. I've been there. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it drives some really good conversations for self. I encourage everyone listening to adopt an end of week reflection, right? A growth mindset of what went well, how did I support myself, how can I adjust, and continue that journey of not just losing weight for the sake of weight, not
Right.
losing weight because it's healthy, but instead working on living like the healthier you and realizing that that means enjoying what you're doing, feeling vitality from what you're doing.
Right.
So thanks again for hopping on and letting me, sharing your story and letting me asterisk it with little learning notes along the
Sure.
way. And everyone listening, thank you again for listening. Again, this is the CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast. We release a podcast every Monday on all things nutrition and wellness related, typically pertaining to mentoring, mindsets, and myth busting. We will be back next week with another Mindset Monday. And in the meantime, be well and don't forget to spread the health.